My name is Joe Smith. I'm the founder of Broken Strength Ministries, currently a board member. I'm here with Paul and Becky Klassen. We'd like to cover some issues around the topic of sexual purity. We hope that it will be helpful to both men and women who have had exposure to pornography and some of the effects of that. How did you two meet?
So we met during freshman orientation, actually at what is now the University of Northwestern. We were actually in a line playing kind of a goofy game, a competition that involved 2-liter bottles of Pepsi at the other end of the gym, and we were running with our straws. I don't really remember all the details of the game, but I do remember a tall, blonde, athletic guy that turned my head. Oh. And that was the first time that we met. I don't think we talked a whole lot, but that was the first time we met.
Well, and likewise saw this tall, blonde, pretty girl on the other side, and fortunately we got in the same friend group, and over time just got to know each other through the years. Of course, off and on, as many college relationships are, but we got married the summer after graduation.
Becky, what's your family background?
So I was raised in a solid Christian home, and for that I'm really grateful. I knew what was right and wrong, and I knew, for instance, that sex was to be reserved for marriage, but we did not talk about sex or sexuality at all. To me, it was just awkward. Like if we were watching a movie and there was kissing, I just felt embarrassed. And so I think I grew up knowing that it was a very personal thing, but also I think that was everybody's story at that time.
I think that's true.
Everybody that I knew.
Yeah. Paul, how about your family?
Yeah, very similar. Christian home, in fact, a great Christian heritage, dating to my grandparents and great-grandparents, and so very loving and accepting. 2 older sisters. So the youngest of those was 6 years older than me. So junior high and high school were very much kind of like an only child. So a lot of alone time. Grew up in Denver. Eventually moved to Phoenix my freshman year in high school. So just a great atmosphere. But again, not a whole lot of talk about sex, or I think I was a good kid, so they pretty much figured he's not gonna do anything too bad.
Not too bad. Anyway,
Right.
No arrest coming soon.
Right.
So you went right into ministry right after college as you got married?
Well, no. I mean, we were in ministry because mainly when I was a youth, I was impacted by my youth ministry when I was in high school. I was revealed to pornography as a 7th grader on the school bus. An older kid just dropped a magazine in my lap, and I never knew that those things even existed. And my innocence was stolen, and just like that. But it wasn't until I got to high school, we moved from Denver to Phoenix, and so I started experiencing more loneliness and stress, and so those images that captured me 2 years earlier played into a fantasy life that just grew, and it was a secret, shame-filled struggle, and that's where I went to. I just went to that secret place, and I discovered masturbation in high school, and just was not ever given a scenario. Not that I would have taken advantage of a time to confess or talk about it, but there was no way on this green earth that I was ever going to talk to anybody about this thing.
And so you carried that into as a youth minister, youth pastor?
Correct. Yeah, all the way through college, through our relationship, and 10 years into our marriage, it was a secret struggle.
But then it wasn't a secret. How did you first discover this?
Yeah.
So I think finding out about Paul's struggle completely surprised me. I found out through a bill on our credit card. And when I confronted Paul, he immediately confessed and was repentant. But while I remember Paul saying that he felt better having it out in the open, I was devastated. And I think I felt just a lot of emotions, a wide range. I felt betrayed in an area that was very personal and significant. I felt like my trust had been shaken, and what I had assumed was really solid maybe wasn't. So I felt really insecure and afraid of what we might lose.
Because at this point he was a youth pastor or lead pastor?
No, youth pastor. 3 years into being a youth pastor, and actually the summer that our third child was born was when she discovered this. And after 20 years of struggling by myself, feeling alone, it was the first time I ever told somebody anything about this. And so that night was a burden off my back, a huge burden off my back, a huge relief, very emotional, cried like I'd never cried before on her shoulder. And then, I mean, obviously later I more realized the garbage truck that I just dumped on my wife's lap that she now had to deal with.
Yeah. Talk about the healing process. What did it look like to you?
Well, we definitely have a story of healing and victory. But it has been a journey.
Initially it was, we couldn't figure out the timing. A week or two before she set me down and said, "I forgive you," and that was probably the hardest 2 weeks of our marriage, I would say. Just that not knowing. I really felt like she had a right to say, you got to get out of here, or we got to separate or something. I wouldn't have blamed her at all. But she sat me down and said that, and we immediately got into a relationship with a trusted friend who's also a counseling pastor. Okay. And so that became my accountability. That was a huge part of this process.
So I admit that pornography was a difficult thing for me to wrap my mind around and to understand. I remember saying to Paul after a disclosure that he was still struggling, "How could you? I've poured out my heart to you as far as how this affects me and how it affects us, and how could you?" But that's where a really significant point, a turning point for me came about, in that I was just convicted that I was being self-righteous. And that Jesus could just as well say to me, "I have made very clear to you that I love you, and that your sin is destructive, and it comes between you and me." But he doesn't say, "How could you?" when I repent. And so that was really a powerful time for me, of being able to be more compassionate and forgiving. I don't mean to say that it's the easy fix. Just whoever's the spouse of the one struggling should just forgive and go on, because our story really contains a lot of lament and
a lot of forgiveness,
accountability, seeking out friends. It's a whole process, but that was huge for me.
That's a wonderful story of redemption. And would you compare that to the gospel? You were saying, "How can I be so self-righteous?" and God's saying, "Forgiving." How would you compare that within the context of the gospel?
Yeah, I mean, it is the gospel. Jesus Christ came to this earth to save sinners, and that makes all the difference.
So what would you say to a wife who's discovered her husband? How would you counsel that lady?
Well, I think part of that is that you need to cry out to God. You need to let yourself mourn. There's a lot of psalms that are lamenting. You need other people. Be careful who you let into your story, but it's important. You need other people to cry on their shoulder. Seek out God's truth.
Takes time.
It takes time.
So there's a transactional part of saying "I forgive you," which can be immediate, but then there's the relationship trust building that takes time, the relational aspect of forgiveness.
Yeah, and that's been 23 years up until today that process has been happening. Yeah.
Do you still have fears after 23 years?
Yeah, I do. I think it's important to. I mean, I don't know if you define it as fear, but to ever feel like you are above us, whatever you're struggling with, it's probably pride.
I've heard other testimonies of the marriage is stronger now, but there's still an element of when certain alarm bells go off, there's this level of anxiety or concern that, oh my goodness, are we going there again? Do you experience that still?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what gives me great joy and satisfaction and security is knowing that Paul is following through on so many of the things that we've been able to put in place. The relationships that he pursues and the promises that he reads to me, just as we seek God together, and I've seen his growth. It's been awesome.
How does this experience affect what you do now going forward?
Yeah, I mean, just her describing the struggle that continues and the weariness maybe that she even has of me is a huge part of a growing relationship. I think it's a humble relationship. It's a need to realize we need Jesus, we need forgiveness, we need each other, we need constant accountability no matter where you're at. And so, you know, over these 23 years, I've in pastoring and in building relationships with men who struggle, with men who gain victory, realizing, you know what, I desire to help men do that and to be part of a ministry that supports the local church. And so I think that's the biggest part of it, being in the local church and realizing men there need to know there's hope there in the gospel, in those relationships, and that those aren't easy and those aren't happening in many contexts because we're guys, to be honest, and we don't want to talk about that. But the fact that there's strength in that weakness, 2 Corinthians 12:9, when Jesus promises, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. And if his strength is perfected in my weakness, then I'm going to dive into my weakness. And I'm going to say, yeah, that's me. And so the strength, this victory that we've had over the years, and now to see where I'm at, how I'm willing to text my accountability buddies. I'm willing to tell her at the end of the day, hey, here's something that happened today. I feel like an idiot because I was actually tempted by it. It's easier to say that, not because I'm so strong, but because God's strength is made perfect in that. And kind of a John the Baptist type of prayer, you know, less of me and more of him. And that's one way to put it into practice, I guess, is through that and helping pastors and churches and lay leaders discover that for themselves as well.
Yeah. What would you say to a man who says, a Christian man who says, I don't want to talk to my wife about this. I don't want to hurt her. How would you counsel that man?
Well, I mean, that was my prayer for 20 years. I mean, for 10 years of our marriage, Lord, take this away from me. You know how much I love you. You know how much I love to do ministry. You know that this is getting in the way. Just take it away. But the Lord kind of made it well known. One of his biggest gifts to me was the answer no, because he knew that I needed to humble myself and confess. And if Becky wouldn't have found out, I don't know if I would have had the guts to confess on my own. So he knows what the best way is to get it out there. And so that was, so the counsel then, as a result of that, would be that you're doing her more harm for not telling. If indeed you want a fulfilling, God-honoring marriage. If you just want to be partners in life and just raise kids together and tag team parent. And if you just want to do that, then sure, live your own fantasy life and don't let her in on it. But if you really want a God-honoring marriage that thrives, man, you got to go down that hard road.
One of the verses in 1 John that the minister uses is talking about walking in the light, and it's not just walking in the light with God, but walking with fellow man, and that we would counsel men to always involve their wife at some point. All right. Thank you very much for your time in this interview.
All right. Thanks.